Well, it warmed up quite nice.
It did. It feels great.
And I'll hear it when the fuel gets low.
You will. You'll hear it and you'll feel it. It's just a little less performant. So yeah, assuming that we fly that long, which I think we probably will, my intention was to take this one empty so you'd have that sort of sound and feeling, knowing that we had another good burner and it's not an emergency.
Is it? It'll be similar to the rainbow balloon that one day?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds the same.
So it just naturally just turns.
Spins, yeah. Yeah, the balloon will naturally spin during flight. It especially will spin as you're going through different layers. There's a bunch of theories, but the idea is as the wind goes as you're changing directions, then the wind would be sort of more on the left side than the right side, and so you'd get a little bit of a rotation like that. From my perspective, it's so random it doesn't matter. I can't explain it, but that's one of the advantages of having the dual turning pins. Now, in flight, it doesn't matter. We can wander around a basket, we can look any direction.
Position for landing.
When we land, there is an ideal position, but we'll practice being in the wind. And so, like, for the first, I'll say several, we won't worry about trying to rotate the balloon or time that turning vent just right, because there's a way you want to stand that is true regardless of what corner you're in and that kind of thing. So,
pretty view.
okay, lean in.
You can just feel we're level.
It's such a clear day. It's pretty easy to tell because you've got a real nice eye line on the horizon. I can also watch the shadow, and it's tracking in the same direction that the wind would be, and you can get a pretty good feel. What I find is your gut feel is, generally speaking, when you're this high, it's probably good to plus or minus 50 feet a minute. When you're really close to the ground, you're super sensitive to it, and you develop a feeling like, oh, I'm going to start descending in 3 seconds, and you can puff it. And so that sort of ground tracking experience is fun. You got to stay sort of tuned in all the time, but I think it's really cool. Okay, so every now and then I'll just kind of periodically look at my tanks, and so what we're reading here is that is 35% at least. Now, we don't know whether that means it's 36% or 100,
Right.
but that's the best we can do with these tanks. Even the tank we're using is still on there. So in general, that's referred to as on the peg, and when it starts to come down to 30, and the phrase that you'll hear people use is, well, it came off the peg. So, oh, that tank came off the peg at 8:30, kind of a because that's the only time that the gauge has any value.
Is when it's
when it's, in that sense, 30% or less.
Right.
And when that happens, you'll get a feel for how quickly does it go from 30 to 0. Because right now you don't know, are we at 80, are we at 90, are we at 50? Who knows? I have no way of knowing. All right, my suggestion is let's jump up about 300 or 400 feet and match up with Dave there and sort of take this south track.
Okay.
Primarily because that's where the cool kids are, and if we needed help getting into an area, it's nice to have. And we do know somewhere around here is the boundary of the Class B airspace.
Right.
Which means...
Somewhere right in here.
Right. And if let's say that it was right here, then that means we're limited to 8,000 feet. We're currently at 67. We got a lot of running room, but it's always nice to just be aware. That's the advantage of reading the sectional before the flight.
Right. Yeah, me and Scott and Amanda looked at it this morning.
Okay. We've made a little bit of that turn. We're going almost due east, and I anticipate that we'll just start to make a gradual right turn, and we'll sort of head out into that same direction.
Still keep climbing?
Yeah, this is a perfect ring.
That one right there.
Yep, so Bob came up. We're well clear of the towers, but it's important that we don't lose sight of them.
Right.
And then thinking in terms of if something went wrong and we had to land, well, we could land in a lot of places. The biggest hazards we have are the towers, these big power lines, and then there's probably little power lines on most of the roads.
Right.
And so like there's power lines along this paved road here. So we would just have to be cautious of that. But from a safety perspective, like in a medical emergency or even equipment failure, we could land in any of these fields. It might be considered trespassing. We may or may not have access, but in an emergency sense,
We'll deal with all that later.
absolutely.
Deal with it on the ground.
Yeah, when there's not a risk of having more of a heart attack or more fire or more leaks or whatever is going on. Okay, so we just now started to pick up that turn at 7,200 feet. Yep, and Bob just jumped into it a little bit earlier than we did. And what you'll find is as you gain more confidence, you will be more willing to push the balloon a little harder. We don't ever want to exceed its performance limitations, but I can tell you these balloons perform so well. We could be going up at 800 or 900 feet a minute now and wouldn't even be close to pushing the balloon. The challenge with that is you've got to be a lot more on top of it and a lot more able to predict what's going to happen. And especially in like a steep descent, you have to know
How long it takes to recover. One of the big things that's been on my mind,
Yeah.
like that flare, the whole flare thing and landing and
Yep. Feel that sort of breeze coming in. That tells us that we're within 100 feet of the shear.
Okay, so burn through it.
That's right. And it's true. Surprisingly, it's true even when you're descending. Is you want to keep the balloon warm enough that it stays full as you go down through a shear. Even if you want a fast descent. Sometimes what I'll do is if I know that I'm going to go down and there's going to be a major shear, I'll sort of warm up the balloon or slow down the descent to get through the shear so that I don't have as much caving in.
Right.
And then as soon as I'm through the shear, maybe even vent again to get that aggressive descent going. But in general, you just don't want to be soft on a shear. And we're flying light enough, just the two of us, on a cold day, that you could experience.
I did my weight calculator last night, and we're at this altitude, or where we were at, 2,100 pounds, I think.
Okay.
So we were well within our weight limit.
Yeah, I would have.
Does it sound right?
21 sounds too heavy.
Okay.
We'd have to run the numbers, but it feels like the gross weight for you and I.
About 1,100 or 11.
I was thinking it would be somewhere between 11 and 12. So my guess is you counted something twice.
Okay.
Most common is you probably counted fuel twice.
Okay.
But yeah, so I would think we're about 1,200 feet or 1,200 pounds today, maybe a little less. And so yeah, we have a lot of leeway here because we're only flying at 170 degrees.
Right.
Okay, so we've just now started to make that turn. Now we were going about 60 degrees. Now we're just slightly more than east. And I think if we keep climbing a little bit, we'll get a little bit of that track right with Dave and Dave there. Okay, so we've been hot about 35 minutes now. So I would anticipate this tank will start coming off the peg here pretty quick, pretty soon. But again, we still got 3 other tanks, so we got tons of fuel today. Let's go ahead and climb it just a little bit more to kind of get that side. Okay, now, we're not going to land anytime soon, but let's start thinking about planning the landing, okay? First thing I look for is there a good indicator of wind anywhere? Are there flags? Are there steam? Are there smoke? Are there other balloons? Well, we've got a few other balloons. Right. They're high enough they're not helpful to us yet. They might be eventually. The biggest thing I see is out here, this big steam out there.
Oh, yeah.
It appears to be going to the northeast.
Okay.
But not very fast. And especially you'll notice how the steam comes out and then just sort of curls up. That tells me that it's pretty slow.
Okay.
But that tells us that if we were to descend now, we would eventually probably get a turn out that way. Are there landing spots out that way?
Looks like plenty.
Surely. So in that sense, this is the right time of the flight to be thinking about that, to think, have I gotten myself in a position where landing is going to be difficult a half an hour from now? My experience is your stress level and the crew's likelihood to like you depends on planning the flight right now. Because when people get into you hear the stories of, well, I was going to land and then the wind shifted and things like that, it happens. The real question is, have you planned to be in a place where a wind shift is tolerable or a wind shift is fatal? You know, and so we're not going to... Now, I don't know these roads and these landowners as well as I do at home, so I don't know this guy's friendly, that guy's not. I don't have any idea. But I can tell you, this field here, it looks really nice.
Right.
I mean, it's dirt,
Right.
but boy, doesn't that look pristine dirt?
Yeah.
So I'd avoid that one.
Right.
But that rough grass over there where the gas pipeline is, yeah, that'd be my...
Just being respectful to the
That's right.
landowners.
And the tricky part is, can the crew get access into there? I don't know. That might be tough. So that'd be an area that if we were going to descend down, we might say to Scott, hey, go to that road north of us and see if you can get into that gas plant field. Because that's a huge field. You could tolerate a little bit of left and right, and you'd avoid this farmer's field since they clearly care.
And that's probably more so an issue on your higher speed landings too.
It is. Well, I don't know actually, because in a higher speed landing, you typically have a much more solid and predictable trajectory. So you can think, okay, I'm hauling, I got 1, 2, 3 options. Whereas in a low wind, you're more likely to get that shift as you come down. And so you might be saying, well, I'm going to this field, and then you get a 90-degree turn. So even in that case, you'd always want to be watching for, power lines or stuff to the sides of you, because you could get a shift, and you're more likely to get a shift on a slow day. Okay, let's bump it up to about, well, let's see, I guess we're right at that 8,000 boundary, so we can't really... I was going to say let's bump it up about 300 or 400 feet, but I think what we'll do is we'll stay at this angle, because we're doing about 130. And you'll see that Dave and David are coming down, so we anticipate that if they stay that area,
like it cooled down real fast.
It did. My guess is that's because there's another shear up there.
Okay.
And so we're just bumping right up against that shear and just kind of floating in it and now cooling down.
Just keep burning through that?
Yep. Okay, it's 8:55 and that tank just came off the peg. So you can see now it's reading between 25 and 30.
Okay.
And so now is the time where I would go to the other burner and just check it.
Okay, this burner?
Yep. And then come back to this one and fly off of it. But then it's just that sanity check of, is the other side still good? Probably. But if it's not, we have time to land on this tank.
Right. If you discovered an issue, land it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and the general sort of the FARs describe it as soon as practicable, which basically means don't do something dumb and drill it into the ground, but sort of initiate landing procedures and find a decent spot. And maybe waiting for the crew, waiting for landowner, not a priority. And the nice thing is, with the equipment we're flying these days, it is so reliable. If you take care of it, it's just going to serve you well. I mean, this stuff is top notch, and it doesn't leak, it doesn't fail. I mean, statistically, the failure rate's more than 0, but it's so darn close. We will prepare for all those, but like in my entire flying career, and I've had my pilot certificate for over 30 years, I have had 3 fuel leaks over 30 years.
That's pretty good.
And 2 of them were at the tank valve, both of them with TEMA fittings. I have now decided I don't like TEMA fittings. It may not be a good conclusion, I don't know, but I've never had a Rego leak. And then the other one, I had a blast valve leak. Which is why I'm so sold out on, if you're going to fly a single burner, fly a Cameron, which is, you got 2 totally independent deals. Okay, so we dropped down a little bit. We were at 79 and we've kind of turned, we were at about 130. Now we've turned a little bit more to the due east. That's not a problem. One of the things I'm watching is Dave down here. He descended all the way to the ground, and he does appear like he's got a strong east. So in that sense, what I would say is that's probably our future today.
Okay, somewhere over in this area.
Yep.
Which looks like there's options.
Yeah. So today, my thinking was, if it's still calm on the ground, I was going to have you do the landing and just kind of talk you through it.
Okay.
If we feel like it's breezy enough that it kind of makes you nervous, then I'll execute the landing, but I'll be talking all the way through it so that you can get that sense of what we're doing, what the thinking is, without kind of the pressure of trying to execute on a dime.
Okay. Man, it'll get away from you real quick.
It does. It cools fast. And it's funny, you hear people talk about, well, it cools faster in the winter because the ambient temperature is so low. Maybe. You'll hear other people, oh, it gets heavy fast in the summer because it's so hot. The data tells us it's about the same. Fuel consumption in winter and summer is about the same. Cooling rates are about the same. It really depends. The biggest thing is porosity of the balloon and the weight that you're carrying.
See, did we shift or did he shift?
I think he shifted. It looks to me like he's got more of a north now.
Which, we're still okay.
Yeah.
Go start going north.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that power line that he's over now that, I'd prefer to avoid. But looking at his shadow, I think this is his shadow. He has still got some east, and my guess is it just feels like an illusion. So he'll cross the power lines. And my guess is they'll descend over after they get over the power lines, and they're probably looking at something out here. Excuse me.
I having beginner's luck with the flying level?
No, I think it's skill.
Is it?
You've got a feel for it. I noticed that you are registering very quickly when we're dropping or not, and so I think you've got more feel for it than you kind of give yourself credit for. Okay, now look at something. Look at Dave and how all of a sudden it looks like he's calmed way down. Whereas if you look at David Headitch, it looks like he's moving.
Yeah.
So my guess is there's a little bit of a fast layer in there, but right on the deck it slows down a little bit.
Which is good for landing.
Yeah. And so you can see his shadow getting closer and closer to the balloon, and that tells us that he is descending, and so he is probably sort of in approach mode. And then here's Dave Headitch's shadow, again got that nice solid northeast and getting closer to him, so he is also descending a little bit. I feel like we have a lot of running room out here. So I'm not in any hurry at all. So from an attractiveness standpoint though, like this really long driveway into the house, that's a pretty attractive landing spot.
Okay.
Because there's no power lines on it. It's probably accessible. Out here in ranch land, there might be a gate at the end, but you know, this isn't a plowed field, right. So that whole area that there is.
Seeing more power lines.
Yep. A good rule of thumb out here in sort of ranch land, every street's going to have them, because they put power lines in when every house is built, and so you should expect every house has power lines going to it. The nice thing is in Colorado, all new building really uses underground power for the distribution piece, so there's not a power line, you know, strung over to the barn kind of thing. Yeah. Whereas in older cities, you'll see that a lot. Okay, let's watch Dave's landing, and we'll just kind of stay up here level. We're not going anywhere, but let's see if Dave's going to execute a landing or whether he's just going to buzz the tower here.
We're probably working on ground tracking.
Okay, so he's climbed up a little bit. In my sense, that's to clear the house without freaking them out. That's a perception issue as much as it's... Okay, you see the parachute opening a little bit. So he's decided he's a little too high. Headitch is pretty low. Not quite low enough for landing yet, but could be by that road. And it could be that they're both just sort of playing around in the open area. Nothing out there to worry about. It also would not surprise me if either one of them is playing around with the intention of getting into the water.
Yeah.
Okay, and so Bob is right over here below us. Okay. Alan's there. Here's Clayton, so he's come back.
Kelly.
That's this orange one right there.
Yep. Is that her balloon? Or?
No, it's Bob Gonzalez. Okay, here's David. He's landing. Okay, nice landing. One touch. Stuck it. Great job.
Getting close.
It is. That's down to about 18% or so. So eventually here we're going to initiate a descent, and it's important that when we do that we keep an eye on where these other balloons are so that we don't come in and crowd them. So we've cleared this major power line. So my suggestion is that we go ahead and initiate a descent.
Okay.
Now, we could do that by venting, or we could do it just by letting the balloon cool. Since we don't have a specific destination in mind, I would just let it cool. But from an instrument perspective, I would let it cool to the point where we're sort of dropping it maybe
200 feet or
I would say a little bit more than that, maybe 350.
Okay.
And then sort of burn enough to maintain that or slow it down a little bit. We don't have a long ways to go, but we do think that there's a little bit of a faster layer down there. So when we feel that shear, we're going to want to warm it up a little bit just to make sure the balloon's full. but let it keep falling so that we get all the way down to the ground level. With his trajectory on the ground and Bob's trajectory up here, we don't think this major power line will be an issue. There's obviously going to be a lot of little power lines out here, but there's no major obstacles out here at all.
Controlling your descent seems a little trickier.
It is, because you're doing the same principle, but you're trying to keep it colder, so you're inherently in a less stable position. I'm going to keep an eye on Clayton just to make sure that we don't slide right in front of him. I don't think we will. I think he's going to be to our east. So now I think of us now in a relatively long, but we're sort of in landing mode. Okay.
Approach, so to speak.
Yep. And so one of the things to be aware of is where are you standing and where's your red line?
Right, the red line's over here.
Okay. And you don't have to have it right now, but think in terms of, okay, where is that? Where do I need to be? Okay. So you're doing a good job. That's a good rate. No problem at all. Clayton's well clear. If the balloon were turned the right direction, in my opinion, this is the ideal landing position.
Okay.
I'd like to be in this corner because my scoop's there.
Right.
I want to be moving that direction.
Right.
Have the red line in hand and one hand on the burner.
And you're secured with your arm around it.
And I'm not going to... The thing I like about this maneuver is I'm not going to leave the basket. Even if I'm hanging on the red line, I can't get out. And I can get really low.
Right.
Without letting go of anything. So I'm not going to leave the basket at all. So that's just sort of my rule of thumb is anytime I'm sort of in landing, sort of the last stretch of landing, I want to have the red line in hand and I want to have an arm around a pole, and then I'll just figure out what corner I'm in. It's okay, even if I'm going backwards, that I might be flying like this, you know, and puff, puff, puff if we're going this direction. But then I would have my arm around here just to make sure. You know, are we landing backwards? Is ballooning going to be up to... Sure, who cares? It doesn't matter. But that arm around the bolster is super critical.
Okay.
And when you are actually coming in for that landing, that is not the time to be looking for your red line.
Right.
And so this is one of the things that Scott talked about. Notice how you have two green lines.
Yeah.
And it's like, and imagine you let... Oh,
right.
That's the advantage of having it down here, is there's one red line, and all I gotta do is grab and pull. And I know it's the right one. Okay. So I see Bob and Dave. Notice that Bob is going to the right. Dave's going more north.
Slightly higher too.
Yep. So what that tells me is as we drop, we're going to continue this path, and then as we drop all the way to the ground, we'll get a left turn.
Okay.
And so just be thinking about what we're seeing and sort of lean your gaze a little to the left. Does that make sense? Clayton's tracking right with us. So like in terms of landing, right around this house, especially in the scrub area, that's probably accessible. That'd be super nice. Where Dave's going, that little sort of skinny field would be great. Yeah. You'd avoid the plowed field. There's a lot of opportunities around here, and so it looks really good. We're not going to worry about it today, but this would also be about the time you'd want to call your crew and say, hey, I'm starting to look for landings. I'm looking at, you know, north of the lakes, or, you know, that kind of a thing. It's right there. I have faith that Scott's paying attention, hopefully. So we don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we've started to pick up a little bit of that left turn because we were going this way. And now you can feel that shear. We're in that faster layer, so you're going to feel us accelerate. And look at these flags out here. They're moving. So that tells us that although we think the wind is calming down on the ground, it might be a pretty brisk landing. So currently my thinking is at some stage that I'll take over and kind of execute the final landing, and we'll talk about sort of the timing of windy landings and things. It's not a difficult procedure to do a windy landing, but the timing of when you do things sort of makes the difference between a
ground tracking and turning your flame off. And
exactly.
making sure you're facing the right direction. Possibly, that's probably last on the list, huh?
It's pretty low on the list. Okay, hazard check. I'm seeing power lines going here. Yep. You see up that dirt road.
I see two sets. I see that set and then another one right in here.
Yep, I do too. Good point.
Oil derrick.
Yep. And these flags suggest that as we come down, we're going to get that left turn, which puts us potentially tracking right along those power lines, right?
Okay.
That's not the end of the world, but just something to be aware of.
Okay.
Crossing set of power lines. Right there. Clayton's over there. Bob is here. We'll keep a close eye on because we feel like we're going to get a turn that direction. But again, really no big deal. Now this area here, this sort of swamp looking area,
Yeah.
that would be an okay place to land, but at a glance it looks like it would be difficult to retrieve.
Okay.
From a safety perspective, I totally land there, but from a retrieval it'd be tough.
Where'd Clayton go?
He's right over here.
Okay, I see him.
Okay, did you notice we just got a hard right turn and picked up speed?
Yeah.
So that tells me that that north layer that the flags are showing is really thin right on the deck.
Okay.
So this layer is great, going to take us over the power lines, and then we'll sort of, you know, we'll dip down and take that due north. Dave's got there. Okay, this takes down to about 10%. So, again, the idea is I would normally fly it completely dry and then switch, which we can keep going. But once I made sort of that commitment of, okay, I'm going to drop and do my ground, I would switch off of the empty tank so that I don't want to be messing with fuel on a landing.
Right.
Even if that's a, well, but that means I got to fuel that tank, and it's, who cares? You want to be able to have sort of 20 minutes of good fuel without having to think about it, because think in terms of planning for missing the first couple of landings.
Right.
Well, I'm going to land in 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes left in that tank. What about second landing or the third, or you know, that kind of thing? And you don't want to be on that third approach when you're already stressed out, thinking, "Oh crap! Now I'm on a." Okay, we should begin to start to feel a shear here pretty soon. Cross over these power lines. There's more power lines on the paved road there. I think there's just going to be power lines on every road, frankly. That's fine. So I'm watching sort of Liberty and Shelgren, as well as Bob and Kelly, because I think they know the area pretty well. I think Clayton does too, actually. So for example, if I saw Clayton jump off or something like, oh, that must be a red area. There aren't any out here that I know of, but
And I should be checking that stuff too before I even take off.
ideally, yeah, what you do is you'd work with a local pilot. Is there a red zone map? And they'll usually talk about, well, there's one farmer, he's over here. The most common, well, you won't get there today, and then the wind will shift. You're like, oh man, where was that? So those are obviously things to pay attention to, but out here there is just isn't much.
See, I didn't burn when we started climbing.
Right,
Is
that's
that
because we're on top of that shear and we actually bounced off of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're currently only going 6 miles an hour at 60 degrees. This is great. From a comfort level standpoint, I like the idea of staying at this altitude above the power lines for now. If I was looking at a landing in some of these areas, I'd be lower.
Okay.
Now, the idea though is you don't want to be dropping while you're over power lines. So even if we felt like this, let's say we thought this wind was going to hold. I think we're going to get a left turn, but let's say we thought this wind would hold and we're going to aim for that triangle. The ideal scenario would be to descend quickly now, then go over the power lines level or climbing, and then be now you feel as we're dropping through. It's going to feel cold fast, so you're going to want to burn. Make sure you're watching the direction we're going to. Feel that temperature? Now we're in that lower layer, and now we're going to start to turn because we feel that wind in the back of our neck. And so it's going to start to turn us a little bit to the left.
Just keep descending a little at a slow speed, or
Well,
stay
at this
level?
stage, with the power lines in front of us, I would stay fairly level here because we don't need to be landing right now. If we were desperate, you know, I'd say we could thunk it in either of these fields. But at this point, landing in either of these fields would be a pretty rough experience. And then coming up on 2 sets of power lines, you know, my attitude is...
Started climbing again without burning.
You did, yeah.
Is that a temperature inversion?
It is, because right on the ground it's staying real cold.
Still climbing too, that's crazy.
Okay, both of them are down.
Yeah.
Interesting that both of the locals went right in the middle of those plowed fields, so that means I don't have to worry so much about that.
You look how good Scott is, just checking for access.
Yep. Okay, so I'm about to take over, and sort of to get into pilot mode, I'm thinking, do I have my stuff in my pockets? Is it zipped up? Am I good to go? That way, you know, you're not losing stuff right at the last second. Okay, so
Keep going.
one more. That's good. Just watching these cows are getting a little spooked. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take over.
Okay.
So at this point, it's my balloon.
Okay.
And I'm going to rotate us a little bit to try and get to scoop downwind if I can a little bit. Like I say, I don't have a great feel for that. And what that means is now I'm going to stand here with my red line, and even if we were to land in this direction, I'm okay. And so I'm looking at the water. Notice how the water has a calm edge and then it's windy and it's square. That tells me that the wind on the ground is going straight into that lake. Not, you know, left or right, that kind of thing.
See, look how smooth that one is.
Right. And so what I'm going to do, because it's lower, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stay up here a little bit, get over the power lines, and then start thinking about sort of what's out here. I'm looking at sort of basically right along the other side of the trees there. Okay, so which one of these tanks is full and which one's empty?
That's full.
But they look the same. They do look the same. They're slightly different. This one is right on the center. That one is just barely tipped to the right of the center.
So this one's the full
This
one.
one's full.
Okay.
This one's empty. Okay? So it's empty enough now, and I'm sort of going to be turning my attention into landing here pretty soon. And so I'm going to give it a good burn, and I'm going to swap that tank.
Okay.
Giving us a little bit of a lift here because I'm seeing these horses over here.
Yeah, and some behind us too.
They look pretty calm, but no need to be mean to them. Okay, so Bob's deflated, Dave's deflated. I don't see where Alan went. Oh, there he is. Yep, he's pretty low, but still flying. Here's Clayton right next to us. Clayton tends to be a long flyer,
Yeah,
so
I
he
kinda
would be
noticed that.
more likely to stay up. So in terms of these fields, I don't know crops very well, but this one appears as though it's been cut. That one has been cut, but different, right? Like that one, they might still want to be growing hay. So if I had to choose, we won't have this choice, but I would choose this one rather than that one.
Okay.
So let me just sort of give some thought to what's a good approach here. We'll kick back up to 80 degrees. I'm anticipating flying out this way, dropping down, getting a left turn, flying north. And so sort of this gray scrub area, see how there appears to be a road coming to the house and then going into there. That might be a good one. Even in the field with the oil derrick, that probably has access. Might have a fence, might have a gate, but it probably has a road of some sorts, right? So those would be a couple of different good ones. Another one that I'm kind of looking at is the Again, leaning my vision left is even on the other side of the road where that little silver house is.
Yep.
That field looks a lot less precious.
Right. Looks like tall grass.
It does.
Grass.
And so this field here, that looks like it does have access to it. Power lines in and among that water tank, but not out here. Good vent there because I'm going to initiate a descent.
So what would that descent be about? Like just what you did there?
If I let it go, it'll end up to be about 400 or 500 feet a minute. Now that we've just started to feel that turn, I'm going to puff it a little bit so that it doesn't accelerate that much. I just wanted to initiate a descent sort of sooner rather than letting it cool.
How close to the water do you have to be to feel the effects in the different temperature?
Really
just right,
close.
right on top of it.
Yeah, 15 feet past it. So I'm feeling that wind in my face. That tells me we're going to turn. Now is when it's tempting to get super attached to the direction of the scoop. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to move my body so that I can see the direction that we're going. This is about the time you'd want to remind your passengers that, hey, we talked about this. Remember to hang on, bend your knees, and I'll let you know exactly when we're going to land. This cut field actually looks pretty attractive if we keep slowing down like this, because we're not getting that harsh left turn like we
Looks like you can get right in.
It does look that way, yeah.
So much driven in there already, so.
It feels to me like we've almost come to a complete stop. The river's probably helping us a little bit. You can feel the temperature drop, and it's a weird thing, I can't quite describe it, but I can taste the water. So notice that we're now in a high humidity area. So that says that that water is slowing us down, and it's preventing us from getting that sort of easterly track that we had before, because we're just hanging.
Right.
We will gradually move that direction, so I'm just going to be patient with it. I'm cognizant of the trees and power lines, but again, this whole field looks attractive. There's a couple power lines there. We'll have to figure out sort of what that looks like. Keep it warm to stay up here, because I think if we get lower, the water will start to pull us that direction, which gets us sort of further away from a nice field and more into the field we don't want. Clayton did the same thing when he dropped down, so he's hopped back up now. We are still gradually progressing that way. Notice the little puff because we're close to the power lines, and I don't want the balloon to have a chance to get cold, especially as I'm looking around.
Probably better to overburn than...
It is, and that's when the benefit of the real short burns is you probably won't do either. But the temptation here is I can get so focused that I'll just forget to fly the balloon at all. You know, because I'm looking. This is also where people are talking on the radio with the crew.
Right.
Turn left, turn right. No, the other road. And then they forget to fly the balloon, and it obviously doesn't turn out well. Crossing the river has made Scott's life a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he's got to find a way across it, which is probably that main road there with the big truck on it.
Got one right there, so I think he's
How's your stress level?
way better than this morning. I don't know why I was so nervous. Is it normal to be nervous? Okay. I just feel like I've been around it so much, I should be...
Yeah, but in fairness, the pressure's on today in a different way, right?
Right.
So you're not coming out to do the things that you are already well versed in. You're learning new things, and so that's inherently more stressful. Okay, so you'll notice that I bumped up a little bit, hoping that we would get just a breath of air off of the power lines, because the power lines are right in sort of along the trees and the road here. We've continued to drift this way, which is good. Now we switch. A little bit of a left hook, and then into the north. Yep, and there it turns to the north. So I'm going to go ahead and initiate a vent again. I'm currently planning to land in the round field that we're over.
Okay.
Good heavy vent. Let that loosen up a little bit. And we might pick up enough speed that we're going to be over here. And right now my eyes are on these power lines here.
Right.
I'm feeling that turn coming in. That's nice. I don't think I'm willing to put it in that field. That looks like nice grass. Now is the temptation to overburn.
Right.
Because you feel like, oh man, we're getting really close.
Yeah, I feel like I want to burn.
Yeah, but you do, and you get closer to the edge of the field.
Right.
And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of tension on that rope, but not quite open the vent, so that I'm ready and I don't have to get 3 handfuls up. See, like that was an overburn in my opinion. Now I'm going to open the vent a little bit. Yeah, I'm hell happy about this field. I'm going to aim for the scrub side of it. Okay. Again, carrying a lot of tension on the red line just to make sure I'm ready. I'm comfortable that you know what to do, so I don't have to worry about you as a passenger.
Okay.
But you're going to hang on, you're going to bend your knees, we're going to go this way. For you, it probably feels like, man, we should be burning. We should be.
It does.
No, we want our landing to be as level as we can make it.
Right.
So we want to do the descending part here, and then the landing part out there.
Smokestack.
I do, and I also see the fence right in front of it. Between the scrub and the good field is a fence. So we're going to land in the scrub. Now's when I'd love a different turning vent.
Right.
That was a little bit of an overburn. Scott's coming in. I like to ground track at this height because if a fence pops up,
You can pop up over it.
I'm still over it. I'm real happy. I'm going to be just right inside the edge of the corn here so that we have enough room to lay out in the scrub. Okay, this is when I'd love to rotate the balloon, but we're going to take what we get. Notice my arms around the bolster, hands on the red line. I've actually got the vent open, and I'm controlling the balloon purely with the burner. Okay, and I'm going to land right in here. little bit of a bounce. When we get to the front of it, that's good here. Now I'm going to let that parachute go up kind of gently. If we can get the basket to roll over, then the balloon will fill and we can keep it standing. That's how you burn a turning bit. Okay, what'd you think?
It was awesome.
Pretty easy, right?
Yeah. Well, I get nervous. Like we were only going 4 on that landing, and it felt like we were.
Yeah, I think we were actually moving a little bit quicker than that, but not much.
Okay. I felt like we were going 15.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, the balloon's going to rotate around, and the temptation is, oh man, we should do something. But now the wind will fill it better,
Okay.
and so we can stay colder. Scott, would you help us rotate the basket just a little bit? Exactly, yeah, this stuff, the rough here is clearly never watered because we're outside the sprinklers.
Right. Which way do you want to rotate the basket?
Let's rotate this about 90 degrees, that way the wind's kind of filling the scoop. Nice.
Did it help if I got out or? No?
Okay, so that's about the right spot for the basket. The reason I wanted to do that is because now you'll notice I'm not burning, but the balloon's going to stand up. It's going to be naturally more full. And so that allows us to stay heavy, but the balloon's not going to wander off. Okay, so now you're going to lay this down. So you want to be standing here. Again, arm around the bolster. Go ahead there. And then hand on the red line. Okay. Now our procedure in an ideal world, the top priority is we want to turn the pilot light off.
Okay.
Then, if we feel like we have time, we do right now, let's go ahead and shut the fuel off. Okay. I think it's fine, it'll rock back. I'm just going to cool the burner a little bit.
Okay.
I puff it first to make sure it's actually out.
Right.
So now I've cooled the burners and I've drained the fuel. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do is just turn the pilot light off a little bit. Slide it right below us. Open that up so it's nice. Okay. Now, I'm going to climb out, but I'm going to keep my weight on.
Okay.
Much as is necessary here. So with this balloon, what you want to do is you actually want to, you'll come out here with your arms,
Okay.
with both arms, there you go. And then you're going to go ahead and just take all of that and just watch the top. It's all yours, Scott. And you can see the sun coming through there.
Yeah.
And you want to just hold it right there. Now we want to let this basket gracefully fall to the ground, which puts your foot up here. Excellent. And step out. And then lean back against the bolster.
Okay.
You want to do that because any wind that's coming in could drag the basket, and even just this little bit of leaning is enough.
Okay.
Okay. Now, with this balloon, you won't feel this tension go off much, but once you feel like you can let go, then you want to let go of the red line and just let it slide out so that the top is sort of vaguely up at the top.
Okay.
And that also allows us to sort of fish out, where are we standing on it, is it under the basket, and all those sorts of things. So I'm going to leave that there. Hey, nice job, man.
Thank you so much.
Isn't that fun?
It is. Oh, how'd I do?
Awesome. Really awesome.
Oh.